Welcome back, everyone, to Ein Sof Learning. I hope everyone's having an amazing day, ready to learn another Torah portion, which is this week, Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. We're going to learn about a little bit more in depth. Who is Sarah and why is she important? And she died in this Parashat. A few things happen in this week's portion. One is that Sarah dies. Another one is that Isaac gets married. We know Isaac is Sarah's son. Sarah married Abraham. She is the first matriarch, and Abraham is the first patriarch. And they had a son named Isaac. Abraham also had another son, because Abraham had a second wife named Hagar. And they had Ishmael, which was last week's portion. But in this week, Isaac gets married to Rebecca. In Hebrew, we call her Rivka. And of course, Abraham dies in this Torah portion as well. So a lot of major events. We're moving on from one generation to the next generation. Because the generation of Abraham was here to rectify the nefesh of the Adamic soul. What is the Adamic soul? We know that Adam Harishon, the first man, made a sin in the Garden of Eden. What was the sin? He ate from the tree of knowledge, good and bad, which God had told him not to eat from. Who convinced him to do that? Chava. Who convinced Chava? The serpent. So there were 3 people that were liable for that sin. Therefore, 3 punishments were given out. One of them is that the serpent would eat the dust of the ground. Sarah would have pain in childbirth. And, Chava would have pain in childbirth. And Sarah, all women. And then Adam was punished with having to work the land in order to get sustenance and to survive. So, what was the general theme of the sins of all of these punishments? Suffering, because there was an increase of din. Din is basically a divine judgment that's being imposed onto the creation from above to below, because of things that happen down here that are not keeping the balance. We need to have a spiritual and physical balance in order for there to be peace in this world, between the spiritual and the physical, between man and woman, between all opposites, right? Because before the sin, there was peace. Before the sin, animals were at peace. There was not only no wars, but there was no fighting between animals. I mean, can you imagine seeing a sheep and a wolf friends together? I personally cannot imagine it, because we're not used to that type of stuff. But before the sin, in the Garden of Eden, that was their reality. The divine presence was in fact present on earth. But because of the sin, not only did the divine presence leave, but what was left? Death, darkness. The light of the Shekhinah is what was filling this hole. So when the Shekhinah leaves, what's left is the gaping vacancy that the Shekhinah once occupied. And that's where we live today. This world is at this current moment living in exile. It's not just the Jewish people that are in exile. Whenever the Jewish people are in exile, the entire creation suffers. That's why if you're Jewish and you're watching this right now, learning what we're about to learn and getting involved in all of these kosher Torah education, it's not for you. It's for the non-Jews. If you don't do your job, everybody suffers. And that's what we see happening in the world today. What's happening with Israel is not just happening in Israel. Everybody is suffering because of what's happening. Both the Palestinians, the Israelis, the blacks, the whites, everybody is suffering as a result of the unfulfilled potential of the Jewish people. And that's basically, in as short words as we can say it, it's whenever the Jewish people stray from the true path of God, which is Torah. Whenever we don't observe not only the mitzvot, the physical mitzvot, but also on a moralistic level, embody the attributes of God. Empathy, mercy, love. These are the attributes of a Jew. Abraham is called Ish Chesed. Sarah is our holy foremother. She, every single moment of her life, was devoted to serving God. And she died serving God as well, as we're going to see. So let's get into this parasha. But first, a little bit of background information. We know that Abraham is our first forefather. He was the first person to really initiate the process of the nation which ends up coming from him, called Israel. He is the grandfather of Israel. And Sarah is the first foremother, or what we call matriarch. If you look at the head tefillin, which we put in between our eyes every morning, as well as the arm tefillin, but if you look at the head tefillin, on the left side of the box, there is a shin with 3 lines. On the right side, there is a shin with 4 lines. The left has 3 corresponding to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. The right side has 4 corresponding to the matriarchs, which are Sarah, Rivka, and then also there was Rachel and Leah. Rivka is the wife of Yitzchak, while Rachel and Leah are the wives of Yaakov. Plus Sarah, you have 4 matriarchs, but 3 patriarchs. This is the entirety of the ancestors from which the entire Jewish nation comes from. But as we also know, Abraham had other kids. Abraham had a total of 7 other children. One of them, the main one of them, is Yishmael. Aside from Yitzchak, which is the progenitor of the Jewish nation, Abraham had Yishmael, who is right now, as we see in the world, has a very strong presence. Who do you think Yishmael is? It's really what we see happening with the spirit of animalism that is covering the world. Because Yishmael is called Pere Adam in the Torah. Pere Adam, which means a wild beast of a man. So anybody that acts like a wild beast is embodying the spirit of Yishmael. All of these events that are taking place are actually because of the sin of Adam. If Adam didn't make that sin in the Garden of Eden, we would still be where we were before the sin, which was love, peace, unity, oneness with God, revelation of God. But nevertheless, let's stop dwelling on the past. How do we move forward? So what did Adam have to do? His soul was reincarnated. His soul was reincarnated into everyone who came from him, including his children and so on. But in order to correct the sin, what we call tikkun, there needed to be a proper vessel, a proper human that was fit for that job. And that was Abraham. Abraham rectified the sin of Adam, but only the nefesh. Isaac rectified the ruach, which is the second level of his soul. And Jacob rectified the neshama, which is the third level of the soul, of the Adamic soul, because we all come from Adam. Not everybody comes from Adam, just to specify. There are those who they're not considered to be descendants of Adam. Some people are descendants of Adam, and others are not. That's why that there are other people before Adam, and living at the same time as Adam. People think Adam Harishon was the first man, but that's not true. He was the first Adam. There is a difference between man and Adam. For example, in Hebrew we have different words for the word man. There's Ish, there's Enosh, Gibor, there's Adam, there's many names. But each one means something very specific according to the Hebrew letters that make up that word. For example, Adam is Aleph, Dalid, final Mem. A-D-M, if you want to know in the English. But they stand for 3 words. Avodah, Dibur, Machshava. Action, speech, thought. These are the 3 powers that are really under the category of someone that's Adam. Whenever you use these faculties for the sake of serving God, you are called Adam. Whenever not only you use them, but you've perfected your speech, you've perfected your action, and you've perfected your thoughts, which means you're in touch with what? Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. Whenever you have corrected your Nefesh, which means you've connected to Abraham, and your Ruach, which means you've connected to Yitzchak, and your Neshama, which means you've connected to Jacob, then you are called Adam. Because those are the 3 energies that they correspond to Aleph, Dalid, Mem. So, that aside, let's get into Sarah now. So the same way Adam was reincarnated into Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for the Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, for the correction of those 3 levels, Chava, or as the people who speak English call Eve, had to also be reincarnated into the Imaot, into the matriarchs, which is Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. Sarah fixed the nefesh of Chava, Rivka fixed the ruach of Chava, and Rachel and Leah, they worked together in order to correct the neshama of Chava. These three levels, nefesh, ruach, neshama, both of Adam and of Chava, were basically damaged as a result of the sin. What was the damage of the sin? It was a influx of gevurah and a diminishment of chasadim. Gevurot are those powers that we call ra, evil, the powers of evil. Adam increased the powers of evil in the creation, which is why death was introduced. Before, there was no death. That's why it was called Tree of Life consciousness. But now, as a result of that sin, we are living in the Tree of Knowledge of good and bad consciousness, which means that there's life, but there's also death. There are things you can do to live a better life and to gain life, and there's things that you can do that bring death. That is the reality that we live in. That's why we're called living in the world of correction. We have to correct this world, to basically sweeten all of the judgments, rectify all of the divine evils that are coming toward us because of the sins that we have not yet repented for. Because the whole entire purpose of the creation is to elevate us to a higher level than we were before the sin. On a Kabbalistic level, Adam needed to create the sin. He needed to make that sin in order to go down to this lowest level of consciousness. He makes some fixing down here, and whenever we raise back up, eventually when the Messiah comes and when God comes back down, which is coming very, very soon in our days, right? We're going to actually be elevated to an even higher level than we were in the Garden of Eden. And that's what we call Olam Haba, the next world, which is even higher, more profound experience of unity with God and love and peace and connection than we once were. So for that reason, we should take our correction very seriously. That's what Tikkun Olam is all about, correcting the world. But the way we do Tikkun Olam is by each individual doing their individual tikkun, which means you need to correct your nefesh, you need to correct your ruach, and you need to correct your neshama. I'm talking to you as a specific individual who is watching this video. When you learn how to correct these three levels, you have fulfilled your portion in Tikkun Olam. You have done your share in bringing the world one step closer to the Messianic era of ultimate universal redemption. But repenting is not the Christian version of repentance where you go to a priest and you tell them what you've done wrong. That's step number one. First, you need to acknowledge that you made a mistake. If you don't acknowledge that you made a mistake and that you're on a lower level of consciousness than where you wish to be, then there's no way for you to grow. First, you have to come to the realization, an awakening. We call it an awakening, that you are not who you could be. At this current moment in time, you have much more potential than what you have at this moment actualized. I know that about myself, but each person needs to come to that understanding, and then they will garner the motivation, the desire to pursue this wisdom. Because this wisdom is not supposed to be an intellectual study. A lot of people I see, they're learning Torah. It's very good. It's godly. It's yes. But they are not learning it for the sake of becoming closer to God. They're learning it for the sake of intellectual stimulation or debate. I see it all the time. And that's a common thing, right? Because it's a wisdom, right? After all, wisdom is in the mind. So mental stimulation. No. That's not what this is all about. The entire purpose of the Torah, of the giving of the Torah, of the Jewish nation, of the creation, is for one purpose: oneness with God. Ultimately, we need to wake up to this reality that God is one. Not just that there's one God who's somewhere over there, but that everything that exists within God. That's what it means that God is one. It means that God is oneness. He's everything. He's the highest unity within which everything exists. Everything that exists is an experience that's taking place within God. However, from the standpoint or the perspective of God, there is no suffering, there is no pain, there is no falsehood, there is no death, there is no lack. Because the highest unity is when all the aspects of the creation are basically revealed in an integrated way. And that's what we call unity. But down here, because of our limited perception, our lower consciousness, we're not able to grasp all of the details and how they all interact. And that's why we're left with so much pain of not being able to comprehend or experience the unity. That's what the suffering and pain of this world is. It's the experience of separation from God. It's very deep. It's very, very deep. Anyways, what did Sarah do to merit being the reincarnation of Eve? What did she do? We know Abraham merited to be the reincarnation of Adam by not just the reincarnation, because remember, all of the souls are all intertwined and all of that. But Abraham was chosen to be the one to correct the sin of Adam, which is why we emphasize him as being the reincarnation, because he was the main point that Adam needed to come to in terms of the descendants of Adam. He was waiting for someone like Abraham, that is the Ish Chesed. He embodies the attribute of kindness, which is exactly that energy that was damaged because of Adam's sin. So Adam's sin caused the attribute of Chesed to diminish. Therefore, Abraham, who is Chesed, whose soul and destiny is to reveal the attribute of Chesed, his entire mission and destiny from birth was to rectify that sin. And he did that by Tefillah, Gamilut Chasadim, and Torah. We know Abraham initiated or established the Shacharit prayer, the morning prayer. And Gamilut Chasadim, he was a man of kindness. He did a lot of good deeds. He opened his place up for people to come learn about monotheism. And third was Torah study, because he was teaching everybody Torah, again, about the oneness of God and helping people to come to that realization, not to idol worship. That was how Abraham merited it. But how did Sarah merit this? What did she do to deserve to A, be the wife of Abraham, and B, be the reincarnation of Chava, which go hand in hand? There are 3 mitzvot that women are obligated to do, which, if they do these 3 things, they are fulfilling their obligation as a woman in this world, especially as a wife. But even though they don't have the obligation to get married, women are not obligated to get married. However, they're obligated in these 3 things: Chala, Nida, ve Hadlikat Haner. I'm going to say them in English now. First, Chala. The mitzvah of baking challah. Challah is a type of bread which we braid in a very ritualistic manner, but it has a lot of deep symbolic meaning in the wisdom of Kabbalah and Torah Judaism. But essentially, what's the mitzvah? Yeah, it's to bake it. But you also need to separate a piece from the challah before you eat from this bread on Shabbat. And we do that typically right after it's done being baked, or before it's baked, we separate a piece of the dough in honor of basically atoning for the sin of Eve. That's what the mitzvah of challah is for, which we separate a piece of the challah. So in the merit of this deed, this was one of the 3 things that Sarah really engaged in. And there are proofs in the Torah that show that Sarah did this. Because it's interesting, how can Sarah have done these if the Torah, the written Torah, was not yet given at that time? Because there are 2 Torahs. They're really one Torah, but there are 2 aspects of Torah. There is the written word, and there is the orally transmitted word. So there's 2 dimensions of Torah. One of them is what we see in the physical Torah scroll when we read the 5 books of Moses. And the other one was basically transmitted by word of mouth over generations from the teachings of Moses. All of the oral traditions originated from the word of Moses, which we know comes ultimately from God, because Moses was not thinking of these things from his own mind. He was receiving divine revelation. And that's exactly how the Torah was given in the first place. It was through Moses. So that just shows you that the patriarchs and the matriarchs, they did keep the Torah even before the reception of the written Torah. Because as we know in the Talmud teaches, that the oral traditions, the oral Torah, actually preceded the written Torah. It's a big deal, by the way. This is a very important thing to understand. That the wisdom of Torah is not coming into existence at any particular point. It always existed. But when was it revealed in a way that there's a people that were chosen to pursue this wisdom and spread this wisdom? That was at Mount Sinai. But the wisdom itself always existed. It's like science. You know, whenever you look at the wisdom of science, it's not something that humans invented. We did not create gravity. We did not create the mathematics and all of these things. I mean, you can say that they're socially constructed or they're only existing because we're trying to understand the world. But nevertheless, the laws and the principles that govern the universe, they exist whether or not we discover them. Whenever we discover them, we are merely revealing something that was concealed. But it was there. But it was just, we didn't know about it yet. We didn't discover it. So too with the wisdom of Torah, you know, it is woven into the fabric of the creation, but it also transcends the creation. Because the created world is just one among many worlds. I know that sounds crazy, but in Kabbalah they teach that there are many worlds and also many creations. There are other creations that preceded this creation, many civilizations that preceded Adam. It's a whole wisdom, and even in history we can see it through the science, that there were people that existed longer than what the philosophers of religion claim, that 6,000 years ago Adam was the first human being. That's not what the Torah says. The Torah says that basically Adam was created from the dust of the ground. And the dust of the ground is mineral level. That's what the lowest level of consciousness is. Because there are typically 4 levels of creation. Whenever we look at what exists within the world, we identify 4 categories of existence. The mineral level is the lowest level. And then above that, what's superior to the minerals, is the vegetation. Like the trees, the plants, those things that they have growth, they have life. Because in the scientific terminology, we call them living things, because they have cell. They have cellular life, they have growth, multiplication, replication, all of these things. Really, the minerals, they also have some level of movement. As we know, the subatomic particles and all of the different weird things happening with quantum physics and the energetic coordinates, all of these weird things happening with the minerals as well. But nevertheless, on a much lower level of vibration than the plant life. Then above the plant life, we have the animals. And above the animals, we have the humans. So this shows, if man was created from the dust, that means that we originally were dust. We were dust. But we made our way up this chain from the mineral level to the plant life to the animal, and we reached the level of humans. And eventually we reached that level of evolution called Adam. Whenever we had both the mind, speech, and action to act towards moral and positive directions of godliness, that's what awakened within Adam Harishon. That's why we call him Adam the first man. He was the first person to reach the level of consciousness that he did, which we currently have, but also we're striving to re-attain because we lost it. We lost the level of consciousness that Adam had. That was because of the sin. Now the second thing that Chava did was she followed the laws of Nida, spiritual purity. Now Abraham's father and mother did not follow the laws of Nida. They actually cohabited with each other during the ritual state of impurity, which means during the menstruation period of the wife of Abraham's father. She was in a state of spiritual impurity called Nida. Nida is whenever there is blood that is in contact with the skin around that area where they actually have the marriage, and that causes a tremendous impure spirit to dwell in that place. It's full of klipa, it's full of tuma, which is basically some sort of a spiritual impurity. But nevertheless, Abraham was born from that spiritual impurity, as we spoke about in 2 weeks ago. But but Sarah, she actually was she was acting in accordance with the laws of ritual purity. And that was, again, before the Torah was given. So a tremendous amount of holiness goes to Sarah. And a third thing that she did, believe it or not, she lit the Shabbat candles, called Hadlikat HaNer. She lit Shabbat candles. But you would ask, Shabbat didn't exist before. Are you sure? Shabbat didn't exist? So what was the creation story? The creation story was 6 days God created the world. And on the 7th day, He rested. The 7th day was Shabbat. The Shabbat, of course, existed, and 100% existed. Like we said, just before, the wisdom of Torah was not created. It always existed. The laws of spiritual purity, they were inherent, but they were revealed on Mount Sinai. But they were concealed beforehand, but they still existed. But nevertheless, they were revealed to Sarah. For whatever reason, she was that level of holiness, that level of connection, that she understood those rules and those laws. And she was connected to the light force through these 3 circumstances. 1, Chala. 2, Nida. And 3, Hadlikat HaNer, lighting the Shabbat candles. But remember, even through all this, she became worthy of marrying Abraham and becoming the reincarnation of Chava and correcting just the nefesh level. All of this that Sarah did and Abraham did together, they only corrected the first, which is the lowest level of Adam's consciousness, which was the nefesh level. So that's why they had children. Yitzchak and obviously Rivka gets married to Yitzchak. They come into the picture within this portion. They were married in this portion. And they are coming to do what? To correct the Ruach level of the Adam consciousness. Rivka is here to correct the Ruach of Chava, while Yitzchak is here to correct the Ruach of Adam. And of course, next in line you have Jacob and his 2 wives, Rachel and Leah, which corrected the Neshama. So let us jump in to the first verse of this week's portion. Vayihyu Chayei Sarah 100 shana ve-20 shana ve-7 shanim shnei Chayei Sarah. And the life of Sarah was 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So, it's telling us a concluding statement about Sarah's life. She was 127 years old when she died, and this is the life of Sarah. But of course, every single word, every single letter, every single vowel or crown or shape of the letter has 4 levels of understanding. There is the pshat, the simple level of understanding, the remez, which is a hinting level, drosh, metaphorical, and sod, mystical. The 4th level is most commonly attributed to the wisdom of Kabbalah, which is the secrets of Torah. But what we're going to learn today is from a sefer which we've been using in the previous videos called Machsov Halavan by Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzera, otherwise known as the Baba Sali. So we read this verse here. First, let's go into a more simple understanding of this verse. Why does it separate the lifespan of Sarah into 3 numbers? Instead of saying 127, he splits it up into 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. So of course there is a mystical meaning to that. But on a more practical level, Rashi comes and tells us, just as a 20-year-old has not sinned, because she's not liable to punishment, so too, when Sarah was 100 years old, she was without sin. Sarah was so pure that she was like a 20-year-old in regards to sin. But what do you mean that a 20-year-old is not responsible for sin? Aren't all human beings responsible for sin? Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. When it comes to the soul levels, we know that whenever you become the age of bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, if you're a girl, you start to receive from your nefesh, which is the lowest level of consciousness. Before then, you're operating off of your Yetzer Hara, which is your evil inclination. Not that babies are evil, but that they are operating off of a selfish consciousness. Because the word evil is an English word. There's no word for evil in Hebrew. The word Ra in Hebrew is spelled Resh Ayin. And it needs to be understood within that context of what is Resh and what is Ayin. You cannot just translate it into English and say Ra is evil. No, Ra is Ra. Don't translate it into English. Try and understand the Hebrew. The Resh stands for the word Ratzon, which means desire. The Ayin stands for Atzmi, or myself. Together, you get selfish desire. The concept of evil just pertains to an immature level of spirituality where the person is still in a selfish consciousness. That's what evil is. Now, there are those that are tremendously evil because they are less evolved. I know it sounds maybe a little bit rude to say, but somebody who is selfish is less evolved when it comes to the development of their mental faculties, their frontal cortex, right? Because we know that the frontal cortex is really the unique aspect of the human brain that gives them the ability to think before they act, as opposed to being like an animal and just being selfish. But nevertheless, for babies, before they're 13 years old, they haven't developed that faculty yet, that higher order functioning, that higher order thinking. So they're mainly Ratzon Atzmi, which is selfish desire. Once you become the age of 13, or 12, for girls, you start to develop that aspect of your brain, which is in correspondence with the level of the soul called Nefesh, which is a godly level, is coming down. And that's your time to start developing your selfless qualities. By the age of 20 years old, you're now starting to reach your Ruach. You're connecting to your Ruach. And by the time you're 40, you're connected to your Neshama, because as you age, you get access to different levels of consciousness. It's like upgrade. You upgrade in a video game, so too we're in a game as well. This is the game of life. As you age, higher levels of consciousness or abilities are accessible to you. Now, they're accessible, but how do you use them? You can use them for good, you can use them for bad. You can use them for selfishness or selflessness. There is no in between. Either you're using your energy and your power and your efforts for something that is contributing toward Mashiach, or something that is posing an obstacle towards the coming of Mashiach. If you are the one that is posing an obstacle that needs to be overcome, you're actually going in the opposite direction. You are acting like Satan, because Satan is the one that puts obstacles. So somebody who is selfish embodies attributes that are not good. And we all embody them. That's why we're in this world. This world is the world of selfishness, is the world of separation, is the world of death. The next world is the world of life, immortality, good, connection. That's the next world. This world, if you're in this world, you've better believe that you have a tremendous responsibility in correcting some attributes within you. That's why you reincarnated. If you don't believe in reincarnation, none of this wisdom can apply. It just becomes luck. I was born and I was lucky to be born rich. I was lucky to be born poor. I was born religious. I was born secular. There is no luck. There's no such thing as chance or randomness. So that means that if you were born into a certain circumstance, even your genetics, even the way you look, where you were born, all of your circumstances within this lifetime are determined by a previous life. If you were mean to somebody in a previous life, you come back to basically balance off the scales. If you were rude to rich people, then next time he's going to make you rich, but he's going to make you miserable. So there's a complete balance in this world. So between 13 and 20, that's your time to really set your stage for your future. So to parents that are raising their children Don't think, oh, when they get to their middle ages, they're going to change. That's not how it works. They will be as stuck, if not more stuck, because the older you become, the harder it is to change. So between 13 and 20, for parents and for yourself, if you're in that age range, and if you're even above it, it still applies. The earlier you can change, the better. The earlier you can learn to change, the better. That's why people ask me all the time, I'm only 20 years old. For those of you watching that don't know, I'm very young. People are like, what are you doing, investing all of your time, these videos, learning Kabbalah, all of these things? They don't understand. I cannot force them to understand. I cannot make them agree with what I'm doing. To each person their own. But the point is that when you recognize what is the truth, and you know which direction you need to go, then why should I waste my time? Time is all I have. That's the only thing I have. And that's what the mercy is. The mercy that God gives me is that He revealed this wisdom to me at this age. That's the mercy. And He gives me however much time I have. Well, I don't know how much time I have in front of me. Hopefully I have a good, healthy lifetime. But nevertheless, time is mercy. So if you're still alive, even if you're 90, look at Sarah. She had Isaac at 90 years old. That's the mercy of God. That at any age, you can still change, you can still do teshuvah, although it is harder, which is understandable. Anyways, what are some proofs within the Torah that Sarah corrected the sin of Eve? Because it's nice that Machsof Lavan, the Baba Sali, is coming and telling us this information, but where is he getting it from? So let's look at the first word of the Parashat. Vayihyu. But Vayihyu means and was. This is the same numerical value, or gematria, as Chet Chava, the sin of Chava, which is 37. So first of all, this just shows already that the life of Sarah was rectifying the sin of Chava. It's the same numerical value. But also the number 37, crazy enough, was the age of Isaac when he was bound by Abraham in the mountain, Akadat Yitzchak. He was 37 years of age. How do we know that? Because Isaac was born when Sarah was 90 years old, and Sarah died at 127, which was the same day as the binding of Isaac. Therefore, 127 minus 90 is 37. Isaac was 37 years old at the binding of Isaac, at that occasion. So this shows another correlation. Yes, we understand that the gematria shows that Sarah was the reincarnation of Chava, and therefore she came here to rectify the sin of Chava. But here we see something incredible, that the very numerical value of 37 is the same age as Isaac on the day of the binding of Isaac, and she died on that same day. This shows a strong correlation between the rectification of Sarah. The tikkun of Sarah was completed on the day of the binding of Isaac. That's why she died. Because there are multiple reasons for death. But one of the reasons that a person dies could be because they have finished their tikkun. Therefore, they have no more need to be in this world because they have fulfilled their purpose. That's one of the reasons a person dies. But nevertheless, Sarah dies at the same day of the binding of Isaac. That's because the binding of Isaac was the necessary step in the tikkun of the nefesh of Chava, which is the tikkun of Sarah. But nevertheless, we see a beautiful story or symphony with all of these details of this first verse coming together and shouting this one line. Sarah is the reincarnation of Chava. And to strengthen this point even more, the last words of this sentence, Shnei Chayei Sarah. These are the years of the life of Sarah. But you can read it as Shnaim Chayei Sarah, the two lives of Sarah. Because the word Shnaim means two. Showing that Sarah had two lives. Not only did she fulfill her own tikkun, but she also rectified the life of Chava. And that is the beauty of the deeper levels of Torah, that you can look into the deeper dimensions of the verse and find out all of these secrets. They're all woven into this sentence. To sum up the sin in the Garden of Eden into one or two words, it's called selfish desire. That's what it is. Whenever you satisfy or you fulfill a selfish desire, that's what a sin is. All types of sin are the fulfillment of a selfish desire. Because if something is selfless, then that means it's in accordance with Torah law. Because there's no such thing as something that is selfless, that is not part of the mission of Judaism and Torah and God. Everything that is selfless is something that agrees with the Torah. Therefore, if it doesn't agree with the Torah, by definition it's selfish, because it's what you want to do, not what the Torah says, not what God wants. Therefore, you can sum up the sin in the garden with just self-satisfying the body. That's why Eve took the apple, or not the apple. See, the myths of Christian and English translations of biblical stories, they also throw me up. There was no apple in the Garden of Eden. Show me where you got that from. Honestly, I want to know where that originates from. Because there's no scripture, not just in the Torah, but in the entire corpus of Jewish knowledge and philosophy, that even suggests that it was an apple. We have fig tree, we have pomegranate tree, we have grapevine, but we have no such thing as an apple tree. That doesn't exist anywhere. But anyways, as a result of her self-satisfying herself with the fruit that she ate, that God told her not to eat, she caused death to be introduced into the world. The concept of death. And a generation of evil spirits entered the creation. Who embodies that introduction of evil spirits into the creation? Cain, or Cain. What did Cain do? He killed Hevel, or Abel. Cain killed Abel. Why did he do that? Because he comes from the spirit of impurity that was introduced into the creation. From which side of the creation? The other side of the creation. Whoa, there's two sides of the creation. It's forbidden to learn too deeply into the wisdom of the other side, which is the forces of impurity that exists within this creation. That's why it's called Tree of Knowledge, good and bad. Because there's two sides within this creation. There are two realms, spiritual realms, two sides. There's the side of holiness, which we call Sitra de Kedusha in Aramaic. And then there is Sitra Achra, the other side. We don't even give it a name. We just say the others, the other side. Because it's forbidden to really delve into that topic. But nevertheless, the soul of Cain comes from the Sitra Achra. That's why the very name Cain, which is Kuf Yud Nun, spells the same word for jealousy. The spirit of jealousy entered the creation. Evil from the other side. Now, if we take this a step further and examine the name of Cain, we get Kuf Yud Nun, which is numerical value of 160. But if you focus on the first letter, Kuf, what is Kuf? In Kabbalah, in spirituality, what does the Kuf represent? The letter Kuf has two meanings. It stands for Kedusha, which means holiness, and Klipa, which are those shells that conceal the holiness, those screens that cover the light of God and cause there to be the illusion of darkness. Darkness is really light that has been concealed. That's why the concept of Sitra Achra, of evil, is compared to Sheker, which means falsehood. The Zohar actually calls it Sheker. So there is no real existence, real sustenance to darkness and evil. They only exist because we allow them to exist. But in the ultimate reality, everything is good. Everything is holy, which is what God is. It's the light. Every Jewish person, for that matter, every single human being that has not reached their potential is filled with this spirit of darkness. Because darkness is those areas of your consciousness that you have not revealed. You are not aware of who you are. And that's what we call darkness. Because you cannot see. Whenever you're in a dark room, are you in the room? Yes. Can you see? No. But what do? You turn on the lights. What's the light? Torah, truth, Kabbalah, wisdom, knowledge. These are those things that bring the light into the dark spots, which means infusing those areas of your own consciousness with light, with awareness, and pursuing them, and attaining them, and revealing the light of your soul within the body. That's the ultimate level. That this klippah, because this is a klippah, be used and taken advantage of to the fullest extent of revealing the holiness that it needs to reveal. You are obligated, not just that you can or it's a nice thing to do. You are responsible to pursue this path. And if you don't, God will get you. It's not a threat. And it's not even a promise. It's happening right now. Look at what's happening in Israel. Look at what's happening all over the world. This is because of the unfulfilled potentials of human beings, specifically, and most importantly, the Jewish souls that are chosen to bring or funnel the light of God into this creation, but they push off their destiny. They are trying to avoid destiny. You cannot avoid destiny. Moving on to the next verse. Va'atamat Sarah bekriyat arba hu Chevron be'eretz Canaan ve'yavo Avraham lispor leSarah ve'livchota. And Sarah died in Kriyat Arba, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to eulogize Sarah and to bewail her. Just right off the bat, let's take a look at the word Kriyat Arba. That's the name of the place that Sarah died. But if you look at the word, it says Kriyat Arba. That means the city of the four. City of what four? So, of course, there's a more mystical level of understanding, and there's a more practical level of understanding. For this, I think we should give a more basic understanding because it goes too deep in the mystical level. So, what is the city of the four? On a basic level, this is corresponding to the four couples that were buried there, and are still buried there, by the way, in the city of Hebron in Eretz Yisrael. What are those four couples? Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebecca, and Jacob and Leah. These are the four couples that are right now. You can go and visit their caves, their burial spots in Hebron. And they are there since this time that they were buried there. But what is a couple? What is a marriage? Okay, Adam and Eve, we have this beauty of marriage, this concept of marriage in Judaism and in many religions. What is it? So marriage is best defined as a spiritual union. It is a coming together of two becoming one. The concept of separation reversing itself back to what it was originally, which is the origin of everything, which is oneness. This is similar to the union of what we oftentimes compare marriage to, of the soul and the body. The soul is the ish, is the man, the male, and the body is the isha, is the woman. So whenever the man and the woman come together, they create unity, then they can really produce and create a new creation, right? So same thing with your soul and your body. The soul is the godly energy, which is what we call the neshama. And the body is what we call the guf. It's the vessel that is here to reveal the light of the soul. Whenever you integrate your soul with your body in a very perfect and unified way, and you reveal the light of your neshama within your body, which we're all striving to do, first one step at a time, nefesh, ruach, and eventually we reach our neshama. Whenever we're able to reveal that light in our body, then we become a co-creator, which is whenever we're able to actually contribute towards that promise which God gave us in the Torah, that we are made in the image of God. What is the image of God? Creating. God is a creator. Hashem is the creator. Whenever you reach that level of connection with Hashem, you actually merge into Him, and you become a creator just as He is. Now, what does that mean? For us, we can understand it the same way that a married couple have a child. Whenever the woman and the man come together to create a child, this, in fact, is the act of creation. And this is what is needed to happen. It's called the unity of separation. Whenever you're bringing two things that are separate and you're unifying them. A woman and a man, a soul and a body, the blacks and the whites, the rights and the lefts, the ups and the downs, all of the opposites. They need to find a way to really come together because they all come from the same origin, from the same source. Now, a question that many people might be asking is, why do I need to work to attain my neshama? I thought I am a neshama. I thought I am a soul. So why do I need to reach my soul? So comes Kabbalah and says, unfortunately, you are not connected to your soul. You are connected to a very low level of consciousness, which, yes, it's included in your soul. I shouldn't say you're not connected to your soul. Everyone's connected to their soul. Otherwise, you cannot live. If you're not connected to the soul, you cannot live. But the point is that we're not conscious of it. We are not aware of our soul. We are aware of our nefesh, and sometimes we're not even aware of our nefesh. But for the most part, most people are aware of their survival. They're aware of what they want to eat. They're aware of the pleasures that satisfy their bodies. That's a level of awareness. But that is actually the lowest level of consciousness, the lowest level of the soul. The neshama is a higher level of your soul. And it does not shine within your body except for those people that nullify their evil inclination and they use their body for godly purposes. Only such a person can get in touch with their neshama, because the neshama is totally pure, which means you need to purify your body in order to be a proper vessel that's worthy of receiving the neshama. I want to repeat that one more time. Your neshama is totally pure, but the body is in the grasp of sin. It needs to be rectified. The nefesh needs to be rectified. The ruach needs to be rectified. And once you train your evil inclination to serve you for godly purposes, then your vessel becomes worthy. It merits to receive the light of the neshama, which is the ultimate reward. But there's also more than that, is what you're going to create after that union takes place, which is your next world. First, you need to reach your neshama, and then we want to create the next world, which is olam haba. What is the experience of the neshama? What's the experience of the soul? Joy. Menucha. Rest. Shabbat. Because Shabbat is called Yom HaMenucha, a day of rest. And when you're connected to your neshama, wow, every day is Shabbat. Every day is revelation of Ein Sof within you. That is what we're striving for. May we be zocheh to find the right teacher, the right spiritual guide to teach us this wisdom so we can create our next world and ultimately bring a better world for everyone. Not just for the individual, not just for the Jews, but for the entire creation. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.